The gavel cracked like a gunshot in the cavernous auction hall, the sound echoing the final, brutal end of an empire. On the rain-slicked pavement outside, Alistair Thorne stood hunched against the wind, his $1,000 coat no longer a shield of power, but a shroud for a ghost. He watched as the glowing letters of his name were pried from the face of the monolithic glass tower he had built, his eyrie, his throne in the sky. It was being sold for pennies on the dollar, his legacy dismantled and auctioned off like scrap metal. His knuckles were white, his face a mask of hollow disbelief. He had crushed hundreds to get to the top. How could it all have been undone by a ghost? By a nobody? By a waitress in a cheap diner? His memory flashed back, not to the grand betrayals or the federal raids, but to a much smaller, more insignificant moment of cruelty, a moment that had sealed his fate. The bell above the door of Sal's place chimed, a cheerful, optimistic sound that was about to be strangled. Chloe Reed looked up from polishing the counter, her smile tightening almost imperceptibly. Alistair Thorne filled the doorway, not just with his physical bulk, but with an aura of predatory entitlement that sucked the warmth from the small diner. His two gorillas, one named Silas, flanked him, their eyes sweeping the room with bored contempt. "Just coffee," Thorne growled, sliding into a booth. The red vinyl squeaked in protest under his weight. Chloe approached, her notepad in hand, her expression professionally neutral. "Cream and sugar." Thorne didn't look at her. He was staring at a small, framed photograph she kept by the cash register. It was a faded picture of a smiling man with kind eyes, holding up a ridiculously large fish. Her father. "What is that junk?" he sneered. "This is a place of business, not a shrine." Chloe's jaw tightened. "A little piece of home, sir." "It's clutter," he snapped. He waved a dismissive hand. "Coffee, black, and be quick about it." She returned moments later, placing the heavy ceramic mug on the table with a steady hand. Thorne picked it up, took a sip, and made a face of theatrical disgust. "Is this battery acid?" he demanded, his voice rising. "Do you people even know what a coffee bean is?" "It's a fresh pot, sir. Our house blend." "Your house blend tastes like dirt." With a flick of his wrist, he didn't just spill the coffee, he aimed it. The scalding black liquid washed over the counter, engulfing the small silver frame. It soaked the photograph, turning her father's smiling face into a blurry brown mess. Chloe froze, the air leaving her lungs in a silent gasp. The heat from the spill stung her hand, but a different kind of fire ignited in her chest. It was the deliberate, casual cruelty of the act. He hadn't just made a mess. He had desecrated a memory. Thorne watched her reaction, a flicker of amusement in his cold eyes. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a single, crumpled dollar bill, and let it flutter down into the puddle of coffee on the counter. "For the damage," he said, the word dripping with sarcasm. He pushed himself out of the booth. "And for the record, this whole block is about to become clutter. I'd start looking for a new job if I were you." He turned and walked out, Silas shooting her a final, menacing glare before following. Chloe stood perfectly still, her gaze fixed on the ruined photograph. The crumpled dollar floated in the coffee like a dead leaf. The cheerful chime of the bell now sounded like a funeral dirge. She carefully lifted the frame, her fingers trembling with a rage so cold and so deep it felt like it could freeze the sun. He thought he was just bullying a waitress. He had no idea he had just declared war on a ghost. Later that evening, Sal, the diner's owner, was hunched over his desk in the back office, his face etched with worry. He was a good man, with a heart bigger than his bank account, and the stress of Thorne's buyout threats was wearing him down. "I don't get it, Chloe," he sighed, running a hand through his thinning grey hair. "The numbers, They just don't add up. Every week we're busy, but every week we're short. It's like the money just vanishes. Chloe pulled up a stool beside him. Let me see. Sal pushed the heavy ledger toward her. It was a mess of handwritten entries, receipts, and invoices. To him, it was an unsolvable puzzle. To Chloe Reed, or rather to the woman she used to be, it was a children's book. Before she was a waitress hiding in plain sight, she was Cassandra Vale, the top forensic accountant at the Department of Justice. She didn't just follow money, she hunted it. She could see the narrative in the numbers, the lies hidden in the decimal points. Her eyes scanned the columns, her mind processing the data with the speed of a supercomputer. It wasn't about math, it was about patterns, human behavior, greed. 30 seconds passed. Here, she said, her finger tapping a column of entries for produce deliveries. And here. And here. Sal squinted. What? Those are from Frank's produce. Been using him for 20 years. Look at the invoice numbers, Chloe said quietly. They're sequential, which is normal. But every fourth invoice is written in a slightly different hand. The 7s are crossed and the 4s are open. Your regular delivery guy writes, closed hours. She then pointed to the cash-out slips for the evening shifts. And on the days of those specific deliveries, the register is always short by an amount that's just under the threshold for daily review. It's always a different amount. 47 $50 one day, $60 20 is the next. But it always corresponds to the price of a phantom order. Your night manager, Rick, is signing off on produce you never receive and pocketing the cash. Sal stared at her, his mouth agape. Rick? But he's been with me for 5 years. It's always the ones you trust, Chloe said, her voice devoid of emotion. She slid the ledger back to him. He's been skimming for at least 6 months. Started small, got bolder. She had laid out a federal case in less time than it took to brew a pot of coffee. Sal was too stunned to question how she knew. He just saw his quiet, dependable waitress who had suddenly revealed a mind like a steel trap. Outside, one of Thorne's men, slouched in a black sedan across the street, watched the diner's lights, completely oblivious to the fact that the real weapon wasn't the Mafia boss in his tower, but the woman wiping down a coffee-stained counter inside. The next day, the war escalated from a cold threat to a hot, brutal assault. Chloe had just finished her morning shift when Silas swaggered back into the diner. This time he wasn't with Thorne. He was alone, and he moved with the predatory confidence of a wolf cornering a sheep. Sal stood behind the counter, looking pale but resolute. Last chance, old man, Silas grunted, leaning his meaty fists on the counter. The wood groaned under his weight. The Don is tired of asking nicely. Sign the papers. Take the payout. It's more than this dump is worth. This dump was my father's, Sal said, his voice trembling but firm. It's put food on the table for my family and half the people on this block for 50 years. It's not for sale. Silas's lips curled into a sneer. Everything's for sale. It's just a question of price. Your price is this. You sign or I start breaking things. And I'm going to start with your kneecaps. Chloe stepped forward from the kitchen doorway. You need to leave, she said, her voice low and steady. Silas turned, his eyes narrowing as he took her in. He chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. Well, look who it is. The coffee girl. You got a lot of nerve. Why don't you run along and polish some spoons before you get hurt? He's not signing, Chloe said, ignoring the insult. And you're trespassing. The amusement vanished from Silas's face, replaced by a flash of violent anger. You think you're tough? He took a step toward her, his shadow falling over her. You don't know who you're messing with. Get out, Silas, Sal repeated, his voice cracking with strain. He clutched his chest, his face suddenly ashen. Please, just go. A strange, wheezing sound escaped his lips. His eyes widened in panic, and he stumbled backward, knocking over a stack of plates that shattered on the floor. Silas just watched, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. Having a little trouble there, old man? Maybe you should have taken the deal. Chloe rushed to Sal's side, ignoring the enforcer completely. Sal! Sal! Look at me! He was gasping for air, his hand clawing at his chest. My pills! He choked out, pointing a trembling finger toward the back office. As Chloe sprinted to get them, Silas sauntered to the door. He didn't offer help. He didn't call an ambulance. He just looked back at the scene of chaos, at the old man collapsing on the floor, and shrugged. Offers off the table tomorrow, he said to the empty room, and walked out, letting the door swing shut behind him. By the time the paramedics arrived, Sal was unconscious. At the hospital, the emergency room doctor delivered the news with grim professionalism. A major cardiac event. The stress, it was a significant contributing factor. He's stable for now, but he's very, very lucky. Chloe stood in the sterile white hallway, the antiseptic smell burning her nostrils. Lucky. He was lucky to be alive after a monster had stood and watched him die. This was no longer about a diner. It was no longer about a spilled coffee or a ruined photograph. Alistair Thorne had, through his proxy, tried to murder the only person who had shown her kindness in years. When she returned to the diner late that night to lock up, she found the final insult, a formal eviction notice slapped onto the glass door with thick, industrial tape. The legal document cited a dozen trumped-up code violations, all of them fabrications. It was signed by a subsidiary of Thorne Consolidated. She ripped the notice from the door, the paper tearing in her fist. The quiet life was over. Cassandra Vale was back, and she was going to burn Alistair Thorne's empire to the ground. She went back inside, not to the kitchen, but to the small apartment above the diner. She pulled a dusty footlocker from beneath her bed and keyed in a 7-digit code. Inside, nestled in yellowing foam, was a satellite phone and a hardened laptop. She flipped it open. The screen glowed to life, a ghost from her past. It was time to go hunting. For 3 days, Chloe barely slept. Fueled by black coffee and a cold, simmering fury, she became a digital phantom. She wasn't just Chloe Reed, the waitress, anymore. She was a hunter, slipping through the firewalls and encrypted servers of Thorne's empire like a shark through water. She used old back doors she'd planted in federal tracking software during her DOJ days, rerouting her signal through a dozen countries until her digital footprint was non-existent. She discovered Thorne's weakness, his ego. He was a Mafia thug, playing at being a legitimate businessman, and he craved public validation. His crown jewel was the upcoming bid for the city's massive waterfront redevelopment project. It was his ticket to legitimacy, a multi-billion-dollar deal that would wash his dirty money clean in the eyes of the public. He was hosting a press conference in 2 days to announce his primary investors, a move designed to project an image of unshakable financial strength. Chloe dug deeper. She peeled back the layers of shell corporations like an onion, following the money trail from a Delaware holding company to a Cayman Islands slush fund, and finally to a name that made her breath catch. Viktor Morozov, a Russian oligarch sanctioned by the Treasury Department 6 months ago. His assets were frozen, his name a toxic brand. Thorne was using him as a silent, primary backer for the biggest public works project in the city's history. It was arrogant, it was reckless, and it was the perfect first target. She didn't leak it to the feds. That was too slow, too quiet. Thorne needed to be hurt publicly. He needed to be humiliated. She compiled a simple, untraceable file, a few key bank transfers, a corporate registration document linking Thorne's shell to Morozov's. She encrypted it and sent it from a public library terminal to a single recipient. Ben Carter, a young, hungry financial journalist at the City Chronicle, known for his tenacity and his dislike of the city's corrupt elite. The subject line was simple: Alistair Thorne's waterfront partners. The day of the press conference was a media circus. Thorne stood at a podium in the grand ballroom of the Sheraton, flanked by city council members who were practically drooling at the thought of his campaign donations. He was beaming, soaking in the flash of the cameras, the personification of untouchable power. Thorne Consolidated is not just building a waterfront, he declared, his voice booming with false sincerity. We are building the future of this great city. With the backing of our esteemed and robust financial partners, we will... A hand shot up in the front row. It was Ben Carter. Thorne's smile tightened. He hated unscripted questions. Yes, Mr. Carter. A quick one. Mr. Thorne, Carter said, his voice clear and amplified by the room's acoustics. You mention your robust financial partners. Could you comment on your relationship with Mr. Viktor Morozov, whose sanctioned funds appear to make up over 40% of your initial investment capital through a shell company named Oceanic Holdings, LLC? A collective gasp went through the room. The city council members beside Thorne froze, their smiles melting from their faces. Thorne's face went from tanned and confident to a blotchy, furious red. He looked like he'd been struck by lightning. That is an outrageous and unfounded accusation, he stammered. But the damage was done. Every camera in the room was now focused on his sweating, panicked face. Is it? Carter pressed, holding up his phone. Because I have wire transfer receipts right here. Would you like to see them? The press conference dissolved into chaos. City officials scrambled away from the podium as if Thorne were radioactive. Reporters shouted questions about federal crimes and international sanctions. The live news feed captured it all. Thorne, screaming at his publicist, his face contorted in a mask of pure rage, his dream of legitimacy turning to ash in a matter of seconds. Back at the diner, Chloe watched the live stream on her laptop. A small, grim smile touched her lips as she saw the breaking news ticker flash across the bottom of the screen. Thorne waterfront deal collapses amid sanctions scandal. It wasn't justice, not yet. But it was a start. It was a satisfying public wound, and it was a taste of the karma that was coming for him. The public humiliation sent Thorne into a spiral of vengeful paranoia. He didn't know who had leaked the information, but his fury found a familiar target, the small, defiant diner that stood in the way of his original, smaller-scale project. The harassment intensified overnight. Health inspectors, fire marshals, and building code enforcers, all on Thorne's payroll, descended on Sal's place, slapping it with a dozen bogus violations. The city cut off their water for an alleged unpaid bill. Thorne was trying to bleed them out, to crush them with 1,000 bureaucratic cuts. Chloe knew her mini-win had only bought her time. A public scandal would wound Thorne, but men like him survived on a different kind of currency, illicit, untraceable, and hidden deep within the guts of his organization. To truly destroy him, she needed to rip out the heart of his entire operation. She needed to get inside the Eyrie. Her first call was to a name she hadn't spoken in 3 years. Echo. He was a former NSA data analyst she had worked with, a ghost in the machine who owed her his life after she'd pulled him out of a botched operation in Caracas. Cassandra? His voice crackled over the encrypted line, full of disbelief. I thought you were dead. Not yet, she replied, her voice flat. I need something. Schematics, full architectural, HVAC, and network infrastructure for Thorn Consolidated Tower. There was a pause. "That's a fortress, Cass. What are you into?" "Cleaning up some clutter," she said. "Can you do it?" "For you? I'll have it in an hour." The files arrived as promised. Chloe spent the next 12 hours studying them, cross-referencing blueprints with network diagrams until she knew the area better than the men who had built it. She identified her target, Gerald Finch, Thorn's chief financial officer. Public records showed Finch was a man living well beyond his means. A McMansion in the suburbs, 2 luxury cars, kids in expensive private schools. He was the classic weak link, the kind of man who would be skimming from his dangerous boss and covering his tracks with frantic, sloppy accounting. His office was on the 34th floor. The floor's network hub was in a maintenance closet at the end of the hall. Getting in wouldn't be easy. The area had biometric scanners and guards who were more like private military than security. But every fortress has a back door. Chloe found hers in the building's maintenance contracts. The IT support was outsourced to a third-party vendor that sent temps for low-level service calls. 2 days later, a woman named Jessica Prentice walked into the Ares lobby. She wore an ill-fitting polo shirt with a generic tech logo, horn-rimmed glasses, and her hair in a messy bun. She carried a standard technician's toolkit. She was invisible, another cog in the corporate machine. The guard barely glanced at her forged ID before waving her through to the service elevator. The 34th floor was a hushed cathedral of grey carpet and glass walls. Chloe kept her head down, her heart pounding, a steady, controlled rhythm. She located the maintenance closet, her keycard clone, lifted from the vendor's database, granting her access with a soft click. Inside, amidst the humming servers, she opened her toolkit. It contained more than just network cables. She pulled out a micro recorder, no bigger than a grain of rice, and a USB keylogger designed to be physically invisible once plugged in. The next part was the riskiest. She had to get into Finch's office. She waited, watching through a crack in the closet door. Her chance came when Finch left for a meeting, leaving his office unlocked for a brief moment. She slipped out, her movements swift and silent. She had less than 30 seconds. As she knelt behind his desk, her fingers flying to install the keylogger on the back of his computer tower, she heard footsteps, heavy ones. Her blood ran cold. It was Silas doing a floor sweep. He was just outside the glass wall of the office, his back to her, speaking into his earpiece. Chloe froze, pressing herself against the mahogany desk, making herself as small as possible. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she held her ground. She finished planting the recorder under the lip of the desk, its adhesive bonding instantly. Silas turned, his gaze sweeping the empty office. For a heart-stopping second, his eyes seemed to lock right on her hiding spot. She held her breath, her muscles coiled, ready to fight. But he saw nothing, just an empty chair and a sleeping computer screen. He grunted and moved on. Chloe waited until his footsteps faded, before slipping back out of the office and into the maintenance closet. She gathered her tools, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She took the service elevator back to the lobby and walked out into the afternoon sun. Just another temp finishing another job. No one had seen a thing. But inside, on the 34th floor, her digital ears and eyes were now wide open, waiting for Gerald Finch to lead her to the heart of Alistair Thorne's rotten kingdom. The data trickled in at first, then became a flood. Finch was exactly the man Chloe had profiled. Greedy, terrified, and sloppy. The keylogger captured passwords to offshore accounts, panicked emails to his wife, and most importantly, access to the real, unedited financial records of Thorn Consolidated. The audio from the micro recorder was even better. It captured Finch's hushed, frantic phone calls, his nervous muttering to himself, and his tense meetings with Thorne. Listening to the recordings, Chloe pieced together the whole sordid picture. Thorne's entire empire was a house of cards, teetering on the verge of collapse after the waterfront deal fell through. He was propped up by a single, massive money-laundering pipeline, and the final critical transaction that kept the whole scheme from imploding was scheduled to happen in less than a week during the city's annual Founders Gala, a black-tie charity event that Thorne himself chaired. It was the height of his arrogance. He would stand on stage, accepting praise for his philanthropy, while in his private suite upstairs, he would personally authorize the final transfer of millions in illegal funds through the charity's own accounts. The transfer was his annual rinse cycle, a tradition that made him feel untouchable. It was also his Achilles heel. Chloe knew she couldn't just go to the feds with the data. Thorne had judges and politicians in his pocket. He could bury the evidence in legal motions for years. She had to expose him in a way that was public, undeniable, and utterly humiliating. She had to use his own ego as the weapon against him. But this time, she wouldn't work alone. She sent an encrypted, anonymous message to Gerald Finch. It contained a single audio file of him discussing a skimmed account with his offshore banker, followed by a simple question. The DOJ offers witness protection. Alistair Thorne offers a shallow grave. You have 1 hour to choose. Finch, terrified and cornered, chose survival. He became her hidden ally, her man on the inside. The night of the gala arrived. The ballroom of the Grand Imperial Hotel was a glittering sea of diamonds and champagne, a microcosm of the city's power elite. Chloe moved through the crowd, a tray of appetizers balanced on one hand, her face a mask of professional deference. She was invisible again, a part of the scenery. She watched them all. The mayor who took Thorne's bribes, the judge who dismissed lawsuits against him, the councilwoman who rezoned land for him. They were all here, celebrating the man who owned them. Across the room, she saw Gerald Finch, looking pale and sweaty in his tuxedo. He caught her eye for a fraction of a second and gave a nearly imperceptible nod. The trap was set. The main event began. The mayor, a portly man with a practiced smile, waddled to the podium to begin his glowing introduction of the evening's chairman. "It is my distinct honor," the mayor boomed, "to introduce a man whose generosity and vision have reshaped our city's skyline and its heart. A true philanthropist, Mr. Alistair Thorne." As the room erupted in polite, obligatory applause, Thorne's personal assistant gave him a subtle nod. The signal. Thorne smiled, waved to the adoring crowd, and then discreetly slipped out a side door, heading for his private penthouse suite to make the illicit transfer. He believed he was untouchable, moving from his public coronation to his private crime with seamless arrogance. Chloe, following a route prearranged with Finch, was assigned to his suite. She followed him a minute later, carrying a silver tray with a single glass of his favorite scotch. 2 of Thorne's guards stood outside the penthouse door. They barely glanced at her. "Mr. Thorne requested this personally," she said, her voice quiet and subservient. One of them, prepped by Finch that a special server would be attending the boss, grunted and opened the door for her. She entered the opulent suite. Alistair Thorne was at a large mahogany desk, his back to her, a laptop open in front of him. A video conference was active on the screen. "Put it on the table," he commanded, not turning around. Chloe placed the tray down, but she didn't leave. She stood in the center of the room, silent. After a moment, Thorne sensed her presence. He finished his call with a curt, "The accounts are primed. The donation will mask the influx. It's clean," and swiveled his chair around, his face a mask of irritation. "What is it? Are you waiting for a tip?" he sneered. Then his eyes focused on her, and a flicker of vague recognition crossed his face. "Do I know you? You spilled coffee on me once," Chloe said, her voice perfectly level, all traces of the timid waitress gone. "In a little diner. Sal's place." Thorne's irritation morphed into amusement. He leaned back in his chair, a cruel smirk spreading across his face. "Oh, I remember now. The coffee girl from the dump on Elm Street. Let me guess. You're here to beg for your job back after I bulldoze that rat trap?" "No," Chloe said, taking a small step forward. "I'm not here about the diner. I'm here about Oceanic Holdings, LLC. The smirk vanished from Thorne's face, the first crack in his granite composure. His eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" "I'm the person who knows about Viktor Morozov," she said, her voice a clinical monotone. "I'm the one who knows about the 20 million you skimmed from the Union Pension Fund. I'm the one who knows you're about to launder $7 million through a children's cancer charity while accepting an award for philanthropy downstairs." Thorne's brief flicker of alarm was instantly consumed by a wave of violent rage. He stood, the chair scraping harshly against the marble floor. He was a mountain of tailored silk and menace. "You're nobody, a waitress. Whatever little secrets you think you have, they die with you in this room." His hand moved toward a panic button hidden beneath the lip of his desk. "Don't," Chloe said calmly, not flinching. "Your head of security took an unexpected early retirement about 10 minutes ago, courtesy of Mr. Finch, who decided he preferred the witness protection program to a shallow grave. He was quite helpful. He even disabled this button." Thorne froze, his hand hovering over the useless switch. His face, already flushed with anger, darkened to a dangerous crimson. He was a cornered animal, and he was done with games. "I own this city," he roared, his voice shaking the crystal glasses on the bar. "I own the mayor who is singing my praises downstairs. I own Judge Albright and his gambling debts. I own every cop in this district. You have nothing. You are nothing. A ghost, a waitress. You think you can touch me?" Downstairs in the ballroom, the mayor was reaching the crescendo of his sycophantic speech. A man of unimpeachable integrity, a true pillar of our community. On the two enormous projection screens on either side of the stage, the Thorne Consolidated logo suddenly flickered and vanished. It was replaced by a live, crystal-clear feed from the penthouse suite. The entire glittering assembly now had a perfect, high-definition view of their benefactor, his face contorted in a mask of pure fury. His voice, piped through the ballroom's powerful sound system, boomed with perfect clarity. "I own the mayor who is singing my praises downstairs. I own Judge Albright and his gambling debts." A sound unlike any other filled the ballroom. The sound of 1,000 people gasping at once, a sudden, violent intake of air that sucked the life out of the room. The mayor froze at the podium, his mouth hanging open, his face draining of all color. At a table near the front, Judge Albright literally choked on his champagne, spraying it across the white tablecloth. Ben Carter, the journalist, slowly lowered his wine glass, a look of stunning vindication spreading across his face. Up in the suite, Thorne was oblivious, lost in his own godlike rage. "I can have you thrown in a river, and no one would ever know your name." "My name is Cassandra Vale," Chloe said, and for the first time she smiled. It was a cold, sharp, terrifying thing. She held up a small, sleek tablet, its screen showing him a mirror image of what the ballroom was seeing, his own ranting, furious face. "And they're all your puppets, Alistair. Your whole city is watching the puppet master pull his own strings. You wanted a legacy? This is it. This moment. You wanted to be seen? Well, smile. Your public awaits." His head snapped from the tablet to a tiny, almost invisible camera lens on the television across the room, a device Finch had ensured was active and patched directly into the gala's AV system. His eyes widened in dawning, abject horror. A strangled, guttural noise escaped his throat. He looked from the camera back to Chloe, his face transforming from red rage to a pasty, sheet-white terror. "You," he whispered, his voice cracking. "You thought you were just bullying a waitress," Chloe continued, her voice relentless, a surgeon's scalpel dissecting him layer by layer. On the screens in the ballroom, her voice was as clear as his. "You didn't realize that from the moment you desecrated my father's memory, I was performing a threat assessment. While you were sneering at a photograph, I was mapping your corporate vulnerabilities. While you sent your thug to give an old man a heart attack, I was inside your CFO's computer. You built this empire to be admired. It's only fitting that everyone gets to see it fall. You are undone by your own reflection." The spell in the ballroom was shattered. Thorne, on screen, scrambled from his desk, his composure shattering into a million pieces. "Shut it off!" he screamed, his voice echoing through the ballroom, a raw shriek of pure panic. "Shut it off!" He lunged for his laptop on the desk, the one still open to the Cayman Islands bank transfer page. "The transfer! You were after the transfer!" "The money was never the point," Chloe said, her voice cutting through his panic like glass. "It was just the proof. The point was you, right here, right now. A common thief in a $1,000 suit, revealed to the world." The main doors of the ballroom were thrown open. A team of FBI agents, clad in tactical vests, swarmed into the room, their weapons held at a low ready. They moved with silent, practiced efficiency through the stunned, frozen crowd. Simultaneously, two agents burst into the penthouse suite, weapons raised. "Alistair Thorne, you are under arrest." Thorne made a final, pathetic lunge for the laptop, not to escape, but to destroy the evidence, to smash the screen. An agent tackled him, driving him hard against the mahogany desk. The last image the city's elite had of their benefactor was of him being slammed against the wall, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated shock and impotent fury, his wrists being cinched tight in steel handcuffs. As they dragged him out, his eyes found Chloe one last time. They were filled not with hatred, but with a horrifying, final understanding. He hadn't been toppled by a rival corporation or a federal task force. He had been surgically dismantled by a ghost he had created in a moment of casual cruelty. Down in the ballroom, hidden in the shadows at the back of the room, a waitress quietly slipped off her apron, placed it on an empty table, and walked out into the cool night air, leaving the chaos and the wreckage of a broken empire behind her. The fall of Alistair Thorne was absolute. The public unmasking was a mortal wound from which there was no recovery. With Finch's testimony, the federal case was airtight. The politicians he owned disavowed him with theatrical outrage. His empire was seized, his name became a curse, and his legacy was reduced to a single, humiliating video clip played on a loop on every news channel. Months later, the sun shone brightly on the block where Sal's place stood. The diner was bustling, a landmark of resilience. Sal was back behind the counter, a pacemaker under his shirt, and a permanent smile on his face. On the day of the federal auction for the Airy, a small crowd gathered on the street opposite the tower. They were the people Thorne had tried to erase. They watched on a large screen as the bidding stalled. Finally, the auctioneer announced a final, shockingly low bid from an anonymous online entity. "Sold," the gavel cracked, "to the Nightingale Trust." A week later, a new sign was hoisted up the face of the tower. The gaudy letters of Thorne were gone, replaced by simple, elegant script. The Reed Center for Community Development, in memory of David Reed. Sal stood on the sidewalk beside Chloe, who held 2 coffees. He looked from the sign, with her father's name now watching over the city, back to her. His eyes were wet with tears of overwhelming gratitude and awe. He saw the waitress, the friend, the avenging angel who had turned a tyrant's monument to greed into a beacon of hope. Chloe handed him a coffee, her gaze fixed on the tower. The rage was gone, replaced by a quiet, profound peace. She had not only destroyed a monster, she had built something better from the ashes. "That crumpled dollar he threw on the counter," Sal said, his voice thick with emotion. "What did you do with it?" Chloe reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, clear acrylic frame. Inside was a single, crumpled, coffee-stained dollar bill. "I kept it," she said softly. "Every empire needs seed money. This was the initial investment in the downfall of his." She tapped the frame. "It's the receipt, proof of purchase for his soul. It wasn't just an insult, Sal. It was a confession. It was the price he put on a person's dignity, on a memory, on a life's work. $1. It serves as a reminder that the most insignificant act of cruelty can have the most significant consequences." She looked up at the towering building that now bore her family's name, a symbol not of power, but of justice delivered and a community restored. "Let's go make some coffee, Sal," she said, a genuine smile finally reaching her eyes. "We have a lot of work to do."